Hi there, Jeremy O'Carroll, founder and director of the Fitzroy Learning Centres here. In this video, what I'd like to do is run you through how to teach the first letters. Now, in the Fitzroy method, the first place to turn to when teaching the first letters is the alphabet book. And what can you learn in the alphabet book? Well, some of the basic things are letter writing. You'll get practice writing your letters. You've got sound recognition, in other words, learning the sounds the letters make. You've got letter recognition, and here you've just got to learn to differentiate one letter from the next. Now, of course, when you're older, this seems like a very basic task, but when you're young, it can be quite a challenge to learn to differentiate, say, a D from a B or an A from an O, because they do look a little bit similar. We've got practice forming two-letter words. So in the alphabet book, we practice two-letter words, and then when we get to the readers, we start learning the three-letter words. Now, where's another place you can turn in the Fitzroy method to learn the sounds the letters make? Well, the Fitzroy Sounds is a great one. In the Fitzroy Sounds, you're going to learn the letters through songs. So each letter will have a little song devoted to it. The children sing along with that song, and in the process, they learn the sound the letter makes. Now, the other thing the Fitzroy Sounds has is letter cards. And on the letter cards, you're going to see just how to write the letters. So there'll be some more letter writing practice. Okay, now, when it comes to learning to write the letters, how do we go about it? Well, the first thing to know is that there is actually some pre-writing letter skills. Now, the beautiful thing about the English alphabet, at least in the printed version, is that basic print is made up from only two sorts of strokes, lines and circles. And so what that means is we can practice lines and circles by themselves, and then when we go to write, well, we've already practiced the basic component parts of the letters. So if you look at a word like a letter like A, then that consists of a circle and a straight line. So if you've already practiced both of them, then even if you're a little kid, you should be able to write the letter A. Okay, now, which letters should you learn to write first? Well, in the Fitzroy method, we teach L, I, and T as the first three. Now, the reason for this is very simple. L, I, and T are the easiest letters to write. So we get the student starting at the most basic point. They learn to write L-I-T. That gives them confidence, and then they're ready to go on to some more difficult letters. Now, we always teach print first in the Fitzroy method. Later on, if the school or the teacher wishes, they can teach cursive writing, but that really only comes in about third grade. And until then, we want them to print first. And some of the reasons are, well, firstly, cursive is just harder, so we don't want to give students the hard thing first. Next, actually, you'll find that the print resembles what they're going to read in books, because of course when you read books it's always printed letters, or almost always anyway. And so the great thing about that is you learn to write a letter in print, and then as you read, that reinforces what you've just learnt to write. Now, the thing about writing is we can actually divide letters up into three sorts: tall, short, and hanging. And these letters will either go between the floor and the ceiling, and that's going to be the case for the short letters. If they're tall letters, then they're going to start above the ceiling and go down to the floor. And if they're hanging, they're going to be sitting on the floor, and then they're going to go below the floor. What about capital letters? When do we teach those? Well, these are taught on a need-to-know basis. We don't teach them at the same time as the lowercase. Why not? Because that would make it far easier to get confused. You see, the beautiful thing about the English language is that there are only 26 lowercase symbols and 26 uppercase symbols, so 52 in total. But we can keep it really simple and just get the kids basically learning the lowercase first, and then only bit by bit as they're needed, we integrate the capitals. But if you introduce them all at once, then you've doubled the number of letters the children need to learn, and that's going to quadruple and more the chance of getting confused. Now, another reason why they're taught second is simply that the lowercase letters are much more common, so they're more practical. If you learn the lowercase, you're going to get to use them right away, whereas the uppercase, you only use them in certain circumstances, like, at the start of a sentence. Another thing to know about the capitals is that they're always tall, so if you can teach the children this, it's going to help them know how to write the capital letters. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about letter sounds versus letter names. Now, in a phonics system, all we worry about is the sounds the letters make. We don't really concern ourselves with letter names. Why not? Well, words are letter sounds basically put together. So if we have a word like cat, then we can read out the letter sounds k, at, t, and that's going to help us read the word. Whereas if we have the letter name C-A-T, that doesn't really resemble the word cat. And so what you'll discover is that the letter sounds help us read and the letter names don't really help us read. And for that reason, we teach the letter sounds in phonics, and just bit by bit kids tend to learn the letter names. Now, when we're teaching the letter sounds, we tend to teach them in words. For instance, l, iron, b, at. And that's a really good way to help children learn the sound a letter makes. We often also use stories to inspire kids to learn a letter. For instance, if we were teaching the letter P, you might teach the story potato, people, and you'd sound it out like that every time you read a P word in the story. You go potato, people, and by doing that, you're showing students that actually it's pretty valuable to learn to read and write the letter P, because it's going to help you read great stories like the Potato People. Now, you can do the exact same thing with poems. Read poems that illustrate or highlight a particular letter sound. Now, many people studying this program come from different parts of Asia, and imagine even if you're just in a place like Singapore, in that one little country or city, you're going to have many different types of accents, and you know that phonics is all concerned with sounds. And so often teachers worry, well, what if my accent's different? Then won't that be a problem? Well, the good news is it doesn't matter if your accent's different. You've just got to remember the correct sound the letters make. And if that sounds is sounded out with a different accent, that's fine. It's actually good, because the students learn to adapt and adjust, and they will soon be very adept at recognizing the sounds of letters, even with people who have different accents. Now, another way I like to teach the letter sounds is by playing what I call the letter lottery game. And that is where you use the alphabet chart, and you can move through it one by one, singing the alphabet song, and then at a certain point you're going to stop on a letter, and the children are going to need to stop on that letter too. And that letter you've stopped on is the grand winner of the letter lottery, and that's going to be the one you can teach on that day. Okay. A few more things. In the Fitzroy Readers teaching material, you're sometimes going to come across the exclamation mark, which we use, and it's not used in its conventional sense. So you're probably wondering, what does it stand for? Well, the exclamation mark in our teacher's materials simply means that we're talking about the sound a letter makes, and as opposed to, say, the name of it. So if we had a exclamation mark, then we're talking about the sound a, as opposed to the name the letter makes, a. What are some other things? Well, a fat cat. What can we say about a fat cat? Well, it's got two really important features. The first one is that it only uses 13 letters. So that's half the alphabet. Now, why do we do that? Well, the reason we do that is because we can get students reading their first book very quickly. Far quicker than if we had them learn all the 26 letters before they started. And the beautiful thing about this is it gives them a great sense of accomplishment. It gives them a real feeling of success. Another thing, another little point which is worth mentioning is the letter A, or the word A, is taught as a special word. Now you might be wondering, why do we teach A as a special word? For instance, if we had the sentence a fat cat, we'd actually sound it out a fat cat, or a for at t, k at t. And the reason we're saying a as opposed to is if we say every time we have the word a, then children presume that the letter a makes the sound and that's the same sound as the letter u, because the letter u makes the sound and so that means kids get confused. And what they might do then is, say you've got the word up, well, they might spell the word up ap, because they've been seeing the word or the letter a and it keeps seeming to make the sound So when we're using a as a word, we say a, And so it's a special word because it gives a different sound to what we'd expect. Okay, another way you can learn the letters is with the Alphabetics game. Now, you can use the cards in the Alphabetics game as flashcards. And with those flashcards, you can play different games. For instance, you might like to time students, give them a certain amount of time, and see how many letters they can recognize. You can also play a game which I call Pontoon. And you'll remember this one is where you use the letter cards to build a kind of a bridge between two mountains over some water. And every time the student recognizes the letter correctly, another card falls down, and that forms part of the pontoon bridge. Now, the other very standard feature of Alphabetics is that you can use the letter cards to simply form words. And so if you had 3 letter cards and they were C-A-N-T, you could make the word k-at-t. So Alphabetics is a good way to learn the letters and then start forming your very first words. Finally, I'd just like to mention the Teacher's Guide. Now, the Teacher's Guide is going to be a very good friend of yours if you teach the Fitzroy method. Now, the first part of the Teacher's Guide is devoted to the general theory. So that's stuff a little bit like what we're talking about now. It explains how the Fitzroy method works and goes into the various components of it and explains those. The second part of the Teacher's Guide is full of teacher resources. So there's over 100 pages of teacher resources like spelling tests, like things like the spelling rules we teach, things like the master list. So there's a whole lot of very practical information there, lesson plans and things like that, which will be quite useful to you. So if you're teaching the Fitzroy method, then I really do recommend you get a hold of the Fitzroy Method Teacher's Guide and just go through it, and you'll find that often you'll want to refer to it and it'll make your teaching life a lot easier. Okay, so that's it for the first letters. Hope you've enjoyed this, hope you found it useful, and I'm going to see you on the next video.